We did it. 1,000 of you. That is not just a number, that is a community. 1,000 people who love these eerie, unsettling stories as much as we do. This is huge, and I cannot thank you enough. Every single comment, like, share. It all matters. You have built this with me, and now we are stepping into something even bigger. And to celebrate, as promised, we are dropping a 4-hour compilation of the best stories yet. The ones that got under your skin, the ones that made you think twice about what is real. But before we get into tonight's new story, a massive thank you to our sponsors. You are the ones keeping this channel alive, and I appreciate every single one of you. If you want to support the channel and get exclusive perks, we have 3 membership tiers: Patient, Surgeon Assistant, and Surgeon. To everyone who has joined already, thank you. If you want to be part of it, hit that join button below. Now, tonight's story is something different. It is dark, it is strange, and it might just change the way you look at the world around you. Are you ready? Let us begin. Okay, so this happened a few years back when I was working the night shift at St. Luke's in Chicago. I'm a registered nurse, been doing it for, well, let's just say long enough to think I've seen everything. I was wrong. Dead wrong. It was a typical Tuesday, you know? A little slow, a little busy, mostly just the usual parade of coughs, colds, and the occasional other things. We had a new admit guy named David Miller. Youngish, maybe early 30s, brought in by ambulance. Said he'd collapsed at work, some kind of office downtown. Said he felt dizzy and just blacked out. Standard workup stuff. I got him settled into room 412 around 8 p.m. He wasn't in great shape. Pale, clammy, but his vitals were stable enough. I hooked him up to the heart monitor, got him on some fluids, explained the call button, all the usual jazz. He was pretty out of it, drifting in and out of sleep. I remember thinking he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. Breathing was shallow but regular. I checked on him again maybe 20 minutes later around 8:20. He was still asleep. Heart monitor showing a normal rhythm. Everything looked textbook. I made a note on his chart and moved on. We were short-staffed that night, so I was running my butt off. Then, about 10 minutes after that, the call light goes off in room 407. I swear, my first thought was, seriously? What now? I head down the hall, expecting to deal with Mrs. Henderson wanting her lukewarm tea refilled for the 4th time. I walk into 407, and there he is, David Miller, sitting up in bed, wide awake, looking completely bewildered. He stares at me, his eyes all wide and bloodshot, and asks, "Where am I?" I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's just disoriented from whatever knocked him out. So, I tell him, "You're at St. Luke's Medical Center, Mr. Miller. You're in room 407. He shakes his head, looking genuinely confused. "That's impossible," he says, his voice raspy. "I was just in 412. My brain short-circuits for a solid 5 seconds. I'm staring at him. He's staring at me. Same face, same name, same patient wristband. I had literally just seen him asleep in 412. "Sir, wait here for a second," I told him. I swear, I practically sprinted back down the hallway to 412. I yanked the door open, and the bed is empty. Empty. A tomb. The sheets were rumpled, like someone had been lying there, but there's nobody there. The 4-stand is still there, but the bag is half empty. And here's where it gets seriously creepy. The damn heart monitor is still beeping. The green line is bouncing across the screen, showing a perfect, steady heartbeat, like someone is still there, connected, even though the bed is empty. I felt a chill run down my spine. I'm not gonna lie. Goosebumps, the whole 9 yards. I checked the bathroom, the closet, nothing. He was just gone. Vanished. I stood there for a good minute, trying to figure out if I'd completely lost my mind. I slowly walked back down to 407. Miller was still sitting up in bed, looking even more confused. I asked him what he remembered. He said he remembered collapsing at his office, being in the ambulance, and then nothing. Just waking up in 407. I didn't tell him about the empty bed and the beeping heart monitor. I figured that would just freak him out even more. Instead, I called the on-call doctor, Dr. Ramsey. Ramsey, bless his heart, was skeptical. He came down, ran a bunch of tests on Miller, and everything came back normal. A little dehydrated, sure, but otherwise perfectly healthy. He was still confused, but other than that, there was nothing physically wrong with him. Ramsey thought it was some weird fugue state, maybe brought on by stress or something. He ordered a psych consult, but the psychiatrist didn't find anything either. Just a normal, slightly stressed out office worker. They kept Miller overnight for observation, but he was discharged the next morning. He seemed fine. A little shaken up, but fine. Here's where the story takes a turn for the weirder. After Miller was discharged, I went back to room 412. Everything was back to normal, cleaned up, ready for the next patient. Except, I noticed something on the floor, underneath the bed. It was a small silver locket. I picked it up. It was cold to the touch. I opened it up, and inside were two tiny pictures. One was of a woman with dark hair, smiling. The other was a picture of David Miller. But it wasn't him. It was someone who looked exactly like him, but older, maybe by 20 years. And he was wearing some kind of uniform, old-fashioned, almost military-looking. I showed the locket to Dr. Ramsey. He just shrugged and said it was probably something Miller dropped. But here's the thing. When I asked Miller about the locket before he was discharged, he looked at me like I was crazy. He said he'd never seen it before in his life. That locket, it felt wrong. Like it was an artifact from another time, another place. Still in a box somewhere in my attic. I can't bring myself to throw it away. I've replayed that night in my head a million times. I can't explain it. I've worked in hospitals for years and I've seen some strange things, but nothing like this. A patient in two places at once? A heart monitor beeping in an empty room? A locket with a picture of a man who looks like my patient, but isn't? I still get chills thinking about it. And sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, I swear I can still hear that damn heart monitor beeping. What do you guys think happened? Was it some kind of hallucination? A glitch in the matrix? Or something else? The symbol pulsed faintly, or maybe that was just the frantic thumping of my own heart. It wasn't elaborate, just a circle bisected by a single, slightly curved line. Simple, yet unsettlingly familiar, like a half-remembered dream or a word on the tip of my tongue. I knelt closer, the chill of the stone floor seeping through my jeans. The air around the symbol shimmered almost imperceptibly, like heat rising off asphalt on a summer day. Impossible, I muttered, more to reassure myself than anything else. My rational mind, the one that had built a career on logic and observation, balked at what my senses were telling me. But the shimmer was undeniable. I reached out a hand, hesitating just inches from the symbol. Was it a trap? Some kind of residual energy field? Or just a trick of the light and my overactive imagination, fueled by too much coffee and too little sleep? My fingers brushed against the stone, and a jolt, not painful but profoundly strange, shot up my arm. Felt like understanding. A sudden, overwhelming flood of images and sensations, none of which I could quite grasp. Ancient stars, swirling nebulas, voices speaking in a language that echoed in the bones of my skull. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, leaving me gasping and disoriented. I recoiled, stumbling backward. What the hell was that? Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the initial shock. Whatever this was, it was beyond my comprehension. It was beyond science, and that terrified me. Elias Thorne, the renowned astrophysicist, was confronted with something that defied the very principles I had dedicated my life to. I needed to leave. Now, but as I turned to go, a voice, clear as a bell, echoed in the vast emptiness of the observatory. It wasn't loud, but it resonated deep within me, bypassing my ears entirely. "He is coming." I spun around, searching for the source. The voice was genderless, timeless, and filled with an unbearable sense of urgency. "Who's coming?" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. "Who are you? Show yourself." Silence. The only sound was the wind whistling through the broken panes of the observatory windows. I stood there, paralyzed, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Paranoia, I realized, was a far more potent drug than any caffeine jolt. I was seeing things, hearing things. This whole place was getting to me. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Rationality, Elias. You need to stay rational. I pulled out my phone, hoping for a signal. Nothing. The thick stone walls and remote location were effectively blocking any communication. I was alone. Resisting the urge to run screaming into the woods, I decided to focus on the symbol. I pulled out my notebook and pen and began to sketch it, trying to capture every detail. Maybe, if I could analyze its geometry, its proportions, I could find some clue to its meaning. Hours passed. The light outside faded, painting the observatory in hues of deepening violet and gray. The temperature plummeted. My fingers were numb, my eyes strained, but I continued to sketch, to analyze, to try to make sense of the impossible. I cross-referenced the symbol against every database I could recall. Astronomical charts, ancient alchemical symbols, even obscure religious iconography. Nothing. It was as if it had sprung from the depths of my own subconscious. Then, I noticed something, a subtle variation in the pattern of the stone floor around the symbol. Almost imperceptible, but there. I ran my hand over the surface, tracing the lines. They were faint, worn smooth by time, but they were definitely there. A network of interconnected lines radiating outwards from the central symbol. As I traced the lines, another jolt, weaker than before but still significant, passed through me. This time the sensation was different. Not a flood of images, but a sense of location. A map imprinted on my mind. I stood up, my legs stiff and aching. The map, or whatever it was pulling me, guiding me. Against my better judgment, I succumbed to the pull. I followed the pattern on the floor, moving slowly, deliberately, as if walking on eggshells. The lines led me to a section of the wall, a part one hadn't paid much attention to before. It looked like a solid stone wall, but as I pressed my hand against it, I felt a slight give, as if the stones were not as firmly cemented as they appeared. I pushed harder, and with a low groan of stone against stone, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the point of no return. Whatever lay beyond this passage, I had a feeling it would change everything. I took a deep breath, activated the flashlight on my phone, and stepped into the darkness. The passage was narrow and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and ancient. The walls were rough-hewn stone, and the floor was uneven, littered with dust and debris. I moved cautiously, my flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. The passage sloped downward, leading me deeper into the earth. After what felt like an eternity, I reached the end. The passage opened into a small, circular chamber. In the center of the chamber stood a single object, a metal sphere, about the size of a basketball, resting on a stone pedestal. The sphere was made of a dark, almost black, metal, etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe as I looked at them. And then I heard the voice again, stronger this time, almost deafening. "He is here." The sphere began to glow, emitting a pulsating light that filled the chamber. The light intensified, blinding me, and I threw up my hands to shield my eyes. When I could see again, the sphere was gone, and standing in its place was a figure. Tall, impossibly tall, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that burned with an ancient, unknowable fire. He was dressed in a flowing robe of shimmering darkness, and his face was devoid of any discernible features, save for those terrifying eyes. He looked at me, and I knew, with a certainty that transcended reason, that this was the being the voice had warned me about. Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He simply raised a hand, and a wave of energy washed over me, lifting me off my feet and slamming me against the wall. The impact knocked the breath out of me, and I slumped to the floor, gasping for air. He took a step towards me, and I knew with absolute certainty that I was about to die. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the attack stopped. The figure froze, his eyes widening in what almost looked like surprise. He turned his head, as if listening to something I couldn't hear, and then he spoke, his voice a low, guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate the very air around me. "Impossible. You cannot be here." He turned back to me, his gaze intense and probing. He reached out a hand, and this time, instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of recognition. As if I knew him, or rather, as if a part of me knew him. He touched my forehead, and another wave of energy washed over me, stronger than before. This time, instead of pain, I felt memories. Memories that weren't mine. Memories of a distant past, of stars being born and dying, of civilizations rising and falling. Memories of a war, a cosmic struggle between forces of light and darkness. And then I understood that I wasn't just Elias Thorne, astrophysicist. I was something more. Something older. The figure stepped back, his expression a mixture of awe and dread. "You are the key," he whispered. "The one who can open the way." The figure's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. "You are the key. The one who can open the way." Open the way to what? To where? The questions swirled in my mind, battling with the alien memories that still reverberated through my being. I looked at the figure, at his obsidian skin and burning eyes, and a chilling realization dawned on me. He wasn't just an alien. He was a tool, a weapon perhaps, and I, Elias Thorne, the astrophysicist who had sought refuge in the quiet solitude of the observatory, was now the instrument by which he would wield that weapon. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice stronger now, laced with a newfound resolve. "What way do you need me to open?" He tilted his head, as if considering my question. "The way to balance, Elias. The way to true control. The universe is fractured, unbalanced. The old order is crumbling. I am here to restore it. By destroying it? I challenged. The memories I had glimpsed hinted at a different story. A story of conquest and domination, not restoration. A flicker of annoyance crossed his faceless features. Sacrifices must be made. Some things must be broken to build anew. He raised his hand again, and I braced myself for another attack. But instead of pain, I felt a gentle pressure on my mind, a probing, searching sensation. I need your memories, Elias, he said, his voice softening. Your knowledge, your connection to this world. Only then can I understand the path forward. He was trying to manipulate me, to use me to his own ends. But I also sensed a desperation in his voice, a vulnerability that belied his imposing presence. He needed me, and that gave me leverage. What if I refuse? I asked, testing his resolve. His eyes narrowed. Refusal is not an option, Elias. The fate of the universe hangs in the balance. You will comply, eventually, but I knew he wouldn't kill me. Not yet. I was too valuable. I decided to play for time. Tell me more, I said. Tell me about this old order you speak of. Tell me about the war. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Very well. But know this, Elias Thorne. The truth is a dangerous thing. Once you know it, you can never go back. And so he began to speak, to weave a tale of cosmic proportions. He spoke of ancient civilizations that had mastered the secrets of the universe, of beings of pure energy who could manipulate reality itself. He spoke of a war that had raged for millennia, a conflict between those who sought to preserve the balance of the universe and those who sought to control it. He described a powerful artifact, known as the Nexus, a device capable of manipulating the fabric of space-time. The Nexus had been shattered into fragments, scattered across the cosmos, its power lost to the ages. His mission, he claimed, was to retrieve those fragments and restore the Nexus, to bring balance back to the universe. But I suspected his true motive was far more selfish. He wanted to control the Nexus, to wield its power for his own purposes. As he spoke, the memories within me grew stronger, clearer. I began to see the truth, not just his version of it, but the full, unvarnished reality. I was a descendant of one of the ancient civilizations, a guardian of the Nexus fragments. My ancestors had hidden those fragments, scattered them across time and space, to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. And now, this being, this cosmic parasite, had come to claim them. And I, Elias Thorne, was the key to unlocking their hiding places. I understand now, I said, cutting him off. You don't want to restore balance. You want power. You want to control the universe. He smiled, a chillingly empty expression. And what if I do? Is that so wrong? Power is not inherently evil, Elias. It is merely a tool. It is how you use it that matters. You will use it to destroy, I countered. I've seen it in your eyes. He sighed. You are stubborn, Elias. But I admire your tenacity. Perhaps you can be persuaded. He reached out again, this time with a different intention. He wasn't trying to probe my mind. He was trying to control it. I closed my eyes and focused, drawing upon the ancient memories within me. I remembered the techniques my ancestors had used to shield their minds, to resist external influence. I felt his power pushing against my mental defenses, a relentless force trying to break through. But I held firm, refusing to yield. The strain was immense, but I knew I couldn't give in. The fate of the universe depended on it. And then, I remembered something else. Something my ancestors had left behind, a failsafe, a last resort. I focused my will, channeling my energy into the symbol etched into the floor. The symbol began to glow, pulsating with a blinding light. The figure recoiled, his eyes widening in horror. "What are you doing?" he cried. I didn't answer. I simply channeled more energy into the symbol, activating its hidden function. The chamber began to shake, the walls trembling. Cracks appeared in the ceiling, and dust rained down from above. The figure lunged at me, trying to stop me, but it was too late. The symbol had been activated. A beam of pure energy shot upwards from the symbol, piercing the roof of the chamber and reaching into the sky. The beam widened, enveloping the entire observatory in a blinding white light. And then, everything went white. I awoke some time later, lying on the floor of the observatory. The sun was shining through the broken windows, casting long shadows across the room. The chamber was gone. The figure was gone. The symbol was gone. Everything was gone. I was alone. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination brought on by stress, sleep deprivation, and too much coffee? I looked around, searching for some sign, some proof that it had all been real. And then I saw it. A small, metallic fragment, lying on the floor near where the symbol had been. It was a piece of the sphere, the device the figure had used to travel between worlds. I picked it up, and a wave of energy passed through me, a faint echo of the power I had felt in the chamber. It had been real, and it was over, for now. I knew that the figure would be back, that the war was far from over. But I also knew that I was ready. I was no longer just Elias Thorne, astrophysicist. I was something more, something older, a guardian, a key, and I would be ready to defend the universe, no matter the cost. I went to the desk that I had been working on and I grabbed the notebook. I went outside to the area of the observatory and sat down on the porch. I opened up the notebook and I grabbed my pen. I began to rewrite the memories that surged through my head. I would be sure to leave everything I knew for someone to understand better than me. And when the time was right, they would know what to do. This happened a few years back when I was working nights in the ER at St. Luke's in Houston. I've seen some messed up stuff in that place, you wouldn't believe half of it. But this was on a whole different level. We got a code blue called in the ICU. An older guy, maybe late 60s, had just completely flatlined. Name was Robert Peterson, I think. Seemed like a decent fella, had heart problems. Been in and out for a while. The whole team piled in, attending physician Dr. Ramirez, a couple of nurses, respiratory therapist, the usual crew. We started compressions, shoved a tube down his throat, the whole 9 yards. He was a big dude, so pumping his chest was like wrestling a grizzly bear. 5 minutes went by. Nothing. Dead silence on the monitor. 10 minutes. Still flatlined. Dr. Ramirez was getting that look on his face. The one that says, "This isn't going anywhere. He's a good doctor. Ramirez, seen it all." But even he looked a little rattled. 20 minutes. Now, 20 minutes is a long time in a code. We're pumping, bagging, injecting epinephrine, the whole shebang. And still, nothing. Just that hauntingly quiet monitor staring back at us. Finally, Ramirez calls it. Time of death, 3:32 a.m. He says it with this weary sigh, like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Everyone just kinda stops. The compressions cease, the bagging stops. We all just stand there, catching our breath, trying to process it. I remember backing away, pulling off my gloves, thinking about grabbing some coffee. Figured I could use the caffeine jolt. And then, beep. Just one single, solitary beep from the heart monitor. We all froze, like someone had hit the pause button on reality. I swear you could hear a pin drop in that room. Everyone's eyes were glued to the monitor, waiting. Beep, beep. A little faster this time. And then, faster still. And then, a voice. Not just any voice, mind you. A flat, mechanical, utterly wrong voice. It wasn't coming from his throat, not the way a normal person speaks. It sounded like it was coming from inside the damn machine itself. And it said, clear as day, do not stop. I am still here. I'm not gonna lie, I nearly crapped my scrubs. I saw the color drain from Dr. Ramirez's face. Even the nurses, who've seen their share of crazy, looked like they were about to bolt. For a second, no one moved. We were all just standing there, mouths agape, staring at this thing on the bed, this corpse that was suddenly talking to us. Then Ramirez, bless his heart, snapped out of it. He was a doctor, damn it. He had a job to do. Start compressions again, he shouted, his voice shaking only slightly. And we did. We went back to work like mindless robots, pumping, bagging, injecting. The monitor was showing a weak, erratic rhythm now. It was like we'd dragged him back from the brink. For the next hour, we fought like hell to keep him alive. The voice didn't come back, thank God. But every now and then, the monitor would beep irregularly, reminding us of what had happened, what was happening. Finally, we managed to stabilize him. Barely. He was still in critical condition, but he was alive. Sort of. We transferred him to a different ICU room, hooked him up to every machine imaginable. The next day, I checked on him. He was still out cold, hooked up to a ventilator. His face was pale and gaunt. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. I asked one of the nurses what the deal was. She said they'd run every test imaginable, but they couldn't find anything physically wrong that would explain what happened. His heart was still weak, but there was no reason he should have come back like that, much less spoken. Nobody talked about the voice. It was like we'd all collectively agreed to pretend it never happened. But I knew, and I could see it in their eyes, that they remembered. Here's the kicker. Over the next few days, Peterson started to improve. Slowly but surely. He started breathing on his own, his vital signs stabilized. Eventually, he woke up. He was confused, disoriented. He didn't remember flatlining. He didn't remember the code. He didn't remember anything from the night it happened. And he sure as hell didn't remember saying, "Do not stop. I am still here." He just remembered feeling tired, like he was fighting against something. We kept him in the hospital for a couple of weeks, ran more tests. Everything came back normal. Eventually, they discharged him. I never saw him again. But I never forgot what happened that night. I've tried to rationalize it, to explain it away. Maybe it was a hallucination, brought on by stress and exhaustion. Maybe it was some weird medical anomaly, a fluke of brain chemistry. But deep down, I know it was something else, something unnatural. And here's the thing that still gets to me. About a month later, I was grabbing lunch in the hospital cafeteria. I overheard two doctors talking. They were discussing a similar case that had happened a couple of years prior in Atlanta. A woman had flatlined, been declared dead, and then came back, and she'd said something similar. Not the exact same words, but something off, something unnatural. It made me wonder, how many other times has this happened? How many people have come back from the dead? Changed? That's what keeps me up at night. The thought that maybe, just maybe, we opened a door that should have stayed closed. And that Robert Peterson, he brought something back with him. And honestly, I don't know what to think, man. I've heard stories, of people having near-death experiences, seeing the other side. But this wasn't like any of those stories. This was darker, more sinister. I left St. Luke's a few months later. Couldn't handle it anymore. Moved out to Denver, took a job at a smaller clinic. It's quieter here, less intense, But I still have nightmares about that night, about that voice. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear I can hear it again. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Do not stop. I am still here. I'm not sure what it means. I'm not sure what's coming. But whatever it is, I have a feeling it's not good. The desert air, already thick with the day's heat, seemed to press down on me, heavy and suffocating. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence that had settled over the camp. Elena was gone, vanished as completely as if she'd dissolved into the sand itself. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Rationality, the bedrock of my archaeological training, was all that stood between me and utter chaos. "Marco!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Alessandro! Elena's missing." Their responses were immediate, though laced with confusion. Alessandro, ever the pragmatist, was the first to reach me. "Missing? What do you mean, missing? She was just here, sketching. Where did she go?" "I don't know," I snapped, instantly regretting my tone. "I was checking the dig site, and when I came back, she was gone. Her sketchbook is here, her water bottle. Everything." Marco, his face etched with worry, joined us. "Did you check the perimeter? Maybe she wandered off." We searched, of course. We fanned out, calling her name until our throats were raw. The sun beat down relentlessly, mocking our efforts. The desert stretched out, an endless expanse of sand and rock, offering no clues, no answers. Just the oppressive silence and the gnawing fear that something terrible had happened. As the hours crawled by, despair began to set in. Alessandro, using the satellite phone, contacted the local authorities. But help would take time to arrive. We were too remote, too far from civilization. We were alone. That night, huddled around a meager fire, the weight of the situation pressed down on us. Alessandro, ever the optimist, tried to reassure us. "She's probably just lost. Maybe she got disoriented. She'll be fine." But even he didn't sound convinced. Marco, his gaze fixed on the flames, spoke in a low voice. "I don't like this. Feels wrong. This place, it's always felt wrong." I knew what he meant. There was an undercurrent to this place, a subtle unease that had lingered since we arrived, a sense of something ancient and powerful, something that didn't want to be disturbed. "What are you suggesting, Marco?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, then met my gaze. "I don't know, David, but I've heard stories, local legends, about this area, about things that disappear in the desert, never to be seen again." Alessandro scoffed. "Legends? Come on, Marco, we're scientists. We deal with facts, not fairy tales. Facts are what we can see and measure." "Alessandro," Marco countered. "But there are things beyond our understanding. Things that science can't explain." I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to dismiss Marco's words as superstition, but I couldn't. There was something about this place, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, that resonated with his unease. Sleep offered little respite. I tossed and turned, haunted by images of Elena, lost and alone in the vast desert. I kept replaying the last time I saw her, searching for any clue, any hint of what might have happened. Then, just before dawn, I woke with a start. I had a vivid image in my mind. Elena standing near the largest dune, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. She wasn't afraid. She seemed entranced. Driven by a desperate hope, I grabbed my flashlight and headed towards the dune. The air was still cool, the sky beginning to lighten in the east. As I reached the crest of the dune, I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. There, carved into the sand, were symbols. Not the familiar hieroglyphs we'd been studying at the dig site, but something older, more primal. They seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light, as if they were alive. And then I saw it. A faint trail of footprints leading away from the dune, towards the heart of the desert. Footprints that looked unmistakably like Elena's. Without hesitation, I followed the trail. Alessandro and Marco would be furious when they discovered I'd gone. But I didn't care. I had to find Elena. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the dunes. The trail led me deeper and deeper into the desert, towards a range of jagged mountains in the distance. As I walked, the symbols in the sand began to appear more frequently, as if guiding me towards a specific destination. Days blurred into a nightmarish haze of heat, exhaustion, and unrelenting anxiety. I rationed my water carefully, pushing myself onward, driven by a primal need to find Elena. The footprints were faint, almost erased by the wind, but I kept following them, clinging to the hope that they would lead me to her. Finally, as dusk approached, I reached the mountains. And there, nestled in a narrow valley, was something that made my heart leap with a mixture of hope and dread. A cave. The entrance to the cave was partially obscured by rocks, but I could see the faint glow of light emanating from within. As I approached, I noticed more of the strange symbols carved into the rock around the entrance. Taking a deep breath, I entered the cave. The air inside was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the scorching heat of the desert. The light came from a series of torches flickering along the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced and swayed. The cave opened into a large chamber, and there, in the center of the chamber, I saw her. Elena was standing before a large stone altar, her eyes closed, her face bathed in the soft glow of the torches. She looked peaceful, serene, almost otherworldly. Around her, figures cloaked in dark robes chanted in a low, rhythmic drone. I couldn't understand the words, but the sound sent shivers down my spine. It was a ritual, a ceremony, and Elena was the center of it. I took a step forward, intending to call out her name, but as I did, one of the figures turned towards me. His face was hidden by a mask, but I could feel his gaze, cold and piercing, locking onto me. He raised his hand, and the chanting stopped. The figures turned to face me, their eyes gleaming in the torchlight. "You should not be here," the masked figure said, his voice low and gravelly. "This is a sacred place." "Where's Elena?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What are you doing to her?" The figure chuckled. "We are not doing anything to her. She has chosen to be here. She has embraced her destiny." "Destiny?" I scoffed. "What are you talking about?" "She is one of us," the figure replied. "She is a descendant of the Ancient Ones. She has the power within her to unlock the secrets of this land." I looked at Elena, searching for some sign of recognition, but her eyes remained closed, her face serene. It was as if she were in a trance, completely unaware of my presence. This is insane, I said, my voice rising. You've brainwashed her. I'm taking her home. I lunged forward, intending to grab Elena and pull her away, but the figures moved quickly, surrounding me, blocking my path. You cannot interfere, the masked figure said. Her destiny is far greater than anything you can offer her. As they restrained me, I looked at Elena once more, and then, for the first time, she opened her eyes. Her gaze met mine, but it wasn't the Elena I knew. Her eyes were different, colder, more distant. There was no love, no recognition, only a strange, unsettling emptiness. Leave David, she said, her voice barely a whisper. This is where I belong. And as I was dragged away, back into the darkness of the desert, I knew that I had lost her. Not just to this place, but to something far more profound. To a destiny I could never understand. The memory of Elena's vacant stare haunted me for months after. Alessandro, bless him, tried to rationalize everything. He chalked it up to a combination of dehydration, stress, and possibly some kind of elaborate hoax orchestrated by locals. He emphasized the lack of concrete evidence, the absence of forced entry into the cave, Elena's own, albeit altered, statement that she wanted to stay. Official investigations petered out, marked as unexplained disappearance. Marco, however, remained convinced that something supernatural had occurred. He delved into local folklore, unearthing tales of an ancient cult that worshipped a forgotten desert god, a being of immense power associated with hidden knowledge and, chillingly, with the disappearance of travelers. He even found vague references to descendants of this cult, individuals said to possess an innate connection to the desert's mystical energies. I myself was torn between scientific skepticism and the undeniable reality of what I had witnessed. I couldn't explain Elena's transformation, the symbols, the ritual. My academic reputation suffered, of course. My obsession with Elena's disappearance became a cautionary tale among my colleagues. I was seen as the brilliant archaeologist who'd finally cracked under the pressure, lost in the sands of his own delusion. Years passed. I tried to move on. I accepted other digs, published papers, attempted to rebuild my life. But Elena's face, that last, empty gaze, would always surface in my dreams. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had abandoned her, that I had failed to understand something crucial. Then, 5 years after Elena's disappearance, I received a package in the mail. No return address, just a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson velvet, was a single object. A small, polished stone etched with one of the symbols I had seen in the desert, the same symbol that marked Elena's trail. A note accompanied the stone, written in a familiar, elegant script. The veil is thinning. They are awakening. He needs you. It was addressed to me by name. Fear, cold and visceral, gripped me. He. Who was he? And why did he need me? I knew instinctively that this was connected to Elena, that whatever had happened to her in that desert was far from over. I contacted Marco immediately. He was initially skeptical, but when I showed him the stone and the note, his eyes widened. This is it, David, he said, his voice hushed. This is proof. They're real. We spent weeks poring over ancient texts, consulting with experts in obscure religions and forgotten languages. We learned that the cult Marco had researched worshipped a being known as the Sand Eater, a deity said to embody the harshness and mystery of the desert. It was believed that this deity could grant immense power to those who were willing to submit to its will, and sometimes it demanded sacrifices. The thinning veil, we discovered, referred to a period of increased spiritual activity, a time when the boundary between the physical and the metaphysical weakened, allowing for easier access to other realms. And the awakening, that could only mean one thing. The Sand Eater was about to manifest in some tangible form. But why did it need me? I was just an archaeologist, a scientist. What possible role could I play in this ancient drama? Then Marco made a breakthrough. He found a passage in an ancient text that spoke of a guardian, an individual chosen by fate to stand against the Sand Eater, to protect the world from its influence. The guardian, according to the text, would possess a unique connection to the land, a deep understanding of its history and its secrets. And then it hit me. It wasn't about what I could do, but what I knew. All those years studying the ruins, piecing together the past, I had unknowingly acquired the knowledge that could be used to defeat the Sand Eater. The note had said, "He needs you, not Elena." The he wasn't the Sand Eater. It was someone on our side. We knew we had to return to the desert. Preparing was a frantic race against time. We gathered supplies, consulted with experts, and tried to anticipate the challenges that lay ahead. We knew we were venturing into the unknown, facing forces beyond our comprehension. But we also knew that we couldn't stand idly by while the world was threatened by an ancient evil. When we arrived back at our old camp, now a ghost town reclaimed by the desert, the air felt heavier, charged with an unsettling energy. The symbols were everywhere, carved into the rocks, etched into the sand. The Sand Eater's influence was growing stronger. Following the same faint trail Elena had taken, we headed once again towards the mountains. As we approached the cave, we could hear the chanting, louder and more insistent than before. This time we were prepared. Marco carried a bag filled with ancient artifacts, objects he believed could weaken the Sand Eater's power. I carried my archaeological tools not for excavation, but for something far more important and potentially dangerous. We entered the cave, weapons drawn, ready for a fight. But what we found was not what we expected. The chamber was still filled with figures in robes, chanting and swaying before the altar. But Elena was no longer among them. In her place stood a towering figure shrouded in shadows, its form shifting and indistinct, as if made of sand itself. The Sand Eater had arrived. The masked figure stepped forward, bowing before the Sand Eater. "We have prepared the way, Master," he said, his voice trembling with reverence. "The veil is thin. Your power is growing." The Sand Eater let out a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cave. Then it turned its gaze towards us. "You dare to intrude upon my domain?" It boomed, its voice echoing through the chamber. "You cannot stop what is coming." Marco stepped forward, holding up one of his artifacts. "We know your power, Sand Eater," he shouted. "We know your weaknesses. We will not let you consume this world." The Sand Eater laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You are fools," it said. "You cannot comprehend the power that I wield. You are nothing but dust in the wind." And then it attacked. The Sand Eater unleashed a wave of energy that sent the figures in robes flying. Marco and I dove for cover, barely avoiding the blast. The battle was joined. Marco hurled his artifacts at the Sand Eater, each one emitting a burst of energy that seemed to weaken it slightly. But the Sand Eater was too powerful. It swatted the artifacts away like toys, its power growing with each passing moment. I knew I had to do something. I had to find a way to strike at the Sand Eater's core. But how? Then I remembered the symbols that had led me to Elena, the symbols that represented the Sand Eater's power. I knew I had to find a way to disrupt them, to break the connection between the Sand Eater and this world. I grabbed my tools and began to carve into the stone floor, replicating the symbols, but altering them, twisting them, turning them against themselves. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all I had. As I carved, I could feel the Sand Eater's power focusing on me. It knew what I was doing. It was trying to stop me, but I kept carving, my hands moving faster and faster, driven by a surge of adrenaline. Finally, I finished. I stood back, panting, and looked at the altered symbols. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground began to shake. The torches flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness. The Sand Eater roared in fury, its form becoming unstable, its power waning. I knew I had succeeded. I had broken the connection. But the Sand Eater was not defeated. It still possessed immense power. It lunged towards me, its shadowy form looming over me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But then, something incredible happened. A figure stepped in front of me, blocking the Sand Eater's path. It was Elena, but this wasn't the vacant, empty Elena I had seen years before. Her eyes were clear, her face determined. She radiated an aura of power, of strength. "You will not harm him," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "I will not allow it." The Sand Eater recoiled, its form wavering. "You cannot defy me, Elena," it said. "You are mine." "I am no one's," Elena replied. "I am free." And then she unleashed her power. A blinding light erupted from her, engulfing the Sand Eater, consuming it in a torrent of energy. The Sand Eater screamed, its form dissolving into sand, its power fading away. Finally, with a whimper, it was gone. The chamber was silent. The darkness receded, revealing Elena standing before me, her face radiant, her eyes filled with love. "David," she said, her voice soft and gentle. "I'm back." Elena explained that she had been manipulated by cult. She had been given a potion and had been misguided. She had fought the Sand Eater from within, waiting for an opportunity to break free. My arrival and my knowledge of the symbols had given her the chance she needed. Together we left the cave, leaving the desert behind us. We returned to the world, forever changed by what we had experienced. The experience in desert was a bit unnatural because the ritual and Sand Eater being was unnatural. However, it was realistic in a way that humans can be manipulated. They can believe in old stories. Life after the desert was never quite normal. Elena, though free from the Sand Eater's influence, carried the scars of her experience. She struggled to reconcile her past life with the power she now possessed. She chose to dedicate her life to protecting the world from other ancient evils, working in the shadows, a silent guardian against the darkness. I, too, came back to teaching with a different perspective. This is going to sound crazy, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I work as a night shift security guard at St. Jude's Hospital here in New Orleans. It's an old building, you know? Lots of history, but also lots of weird vibes. And I'm not talking about the usual hospital stuff. St. Jude's has this whole basement wing that's been shut down for years. I'm talking padlocked doors, official do not enter signs, the whole 9 yards. Everyone just says it's condemned, structural damage, asbestos, the usual stuff. But nobody really talks about why it's condemned. Anyway, a couple of nights ago I was doing my rounds. It was dead quiet, maybe 2 a.m. I was sipping on my lukewarm coffee, fighting off the sleepies, when I saw him. A doctor. Full white coat, the works. Even had those blue surgical gloves on. Now, seeing a doctor at that hour isn't exactly earth-shattering, right? But he wasn't going towards the ER or any of the active wards. He was headed straight for the basement entrance. And not the main entrance, mind you. This was the old basement entrance, the one near the abandoned laundry room. The one with the extra heavy padlock sitting on the door. I swear, I blinked and the padlock was gone and the door was creaking open wider. I could almost swear I heard a tiny click, like of an unlocking mechanism. Okay, now my curiosity was piqued. I know I shouldn't have, but I followed him. I mean, what else was I going to do? Let some mystery doc wander into a condemned part of the hospital in the middle of the night? Plus, I'm a security guard, right? It's practically in the job description to be nosy. The hallway down there was pitch black. Like, swallowed by a whale black. My flashlight was acting up, so I practically had to feel my way along the wall. The air was thick with the smell of dust and something else. Something metallic, almost like blood. It was damp, too. You know how old buildings get that clammy feel? This was that amplified tenfold. I was about halfway down when I saw it. At the very end of the hall, a sliver of light. Not flickering, not buzzing, just a steady, unsettling glow. It was coming from under a door. I crept closer, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Okay, I admit I hesitated for a second. This whole thing felt wrong. But professionalism and my overcuriosity won out. I pushed the door open, and there it was. An old operating room. The kind you see in black and white movies. Gleaming stainless steel, outdated equipment, the whole shebang. And in the center of the room, under a single harsh operating room light, stood the doctor. He was just standing there, perfectly still, silent. He wasn't doing anything, just staring at the empty operating table. It was covered in a stained white sheet, but I swear I could see a dark outline of a human figure underneath, like someone had been lying there for a long, long time, and their imprint had somehow been burned into the fabric. I didn't say anything, couldn't. The air was so thick, so heavy, it felt like it was pressing down on me. He just kept staring at the table. It was like he was waiting for something, or someone, waiting for a patient who would never arrive. Then, slowly, he turned his head. He looked straight at me, and he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't even friendly. It was cold, calculating, like he knew I was there the whole time. The kind of smile where your blood runs cold, and you know you've stumbled into something you really shouldn't have. He didn't say a word. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable. I just stood there, frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 5 seconds, maybe 5 minutes. Felt like an eternity. Finally, I managed to stammer out, "Doctor? Is everything all right?" He just kept smiling. That same unsettling, chilling smile. Then he turned back to the operating table, and the light flickered once, just once, and he was gone. Vanished. Just gone. I stood there for what felt like another year, trying to process what I had just seen. Finally, I backed slowly out of the room, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't run, but I moved quick. I locked the door behind me. I swear, the padlock was back, and practically sprinted back to my security desk. I haven't been back down to that basement since. I haven't told anyone about it either. I'm afraid they'll think I'm crazy, or worse, get me fired. But I can't shake the feeling that I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. That doctor, that room, that smile. It's all stuck in my head. I keep replaying it over and over, trying to make sense of it. And honestly, I'm terrified to find out what he was waiting for. Maybe the structural damage isn't the only reason that wing is closed. Maybe it's to keep something or someone inside. Or maybe to keep us out. I don't know what to do. Should I report this? Should I try to find out more? Or should I just pretend it never happened and hope that Doctor stays in the basement? I really don't know, guys. I'm genuinely spooked. I just needed to get this off my chest. Any advice would be appreciated. And if you ever find yourself at St. Jude's, stay out of the basement. Seriously, you don't want to meet the doctor. The chill in the air deepened as I held the receiver to my ear, the silence stretching, fraying my nerves. Hello? Is anyone there? I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. The only response was the hiss and crackle of static, like 1,000 tiny insects crawling across my eardrum. Finally, a voice, faint and distorted, broke through. It was definitely a woman, but her words were slurred, almost as if she were speaking underwater. Help? Can't see. I can't hear you clearly, I shouted into the phone, my heart pounding. Who is this? Where are you? The voice faded in and out, a garbled whisper carried on the wind. The lake, the old mill, they're coming, then silence, just the static, mocking me with its emptiness. I slammed the receiver down, my hands shaking. The lake, the old mill. Those were landmarks near my childhood home, a small town nestled deep in the Catskills. I hadn't been back in years, not since the accident. Memories, sharp and unwelcome, flooded my mind. The swirling fog on the lake, the crumbling silhouette of the abandoned mill against the gray sky, the screams. I pushed them back, forcing myself to focus. This call, it couldn't be real, could it? A wrong number, perhaps, or some kind of bizarre prank. But the fear in that woman's voice, the desperation, it felt undeniably real. I paced the length of my apartment, my mind racing. Ignore it? Pretend it never happened? That was the sensible thing to do, the adult thing. But the image of that woman, lost and terrified, haunted me. I knew I couldn't just walk away. An hour later, I was behind the wheel of my car, heading north. The city lights receded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the inky blackness of the highway. The radio, usually my companion on long drives, remained stubbornly silent, the static mirroring the unsettling feeling in my gut. The closer I got to my hometown, the heavier the atmosphere became. An oppressive silence settled over the landscape, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. The air felt thick, charged with an unseen energy. I arrived in town late, the streets deserted and eerily quiet. The old mill loomed in the distance, a dark and forbidding shape against the moonlit sky. I parked my car on the outskirts of town and set out on foot, my flashlight cutting a narrow swathe through the darkness. The air around the lake was heavy with moisture, and the smell of decay hung in the air. The old mill, when I reached it, was even more dilapidated than I remembered. The roof had partially collapsed, and the walls were covered in moss and ivy. "Hello!" I called out, my voice echoing across the still water. "Is anyone here?" Silence. I cautiously entered the mill, my flashlight beam dancing across the crumbling walls. The interior was a labyrinth of broken machinery and rotting timbers. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Then I heard it, a faint rustling sound, coming from the upper floor. My heart leaped into my throat. I gripped my flashlight tighter and slowly made my way up the creaking stairs. On the upper floor I found her, A young woman, huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror. She was covered in mud and her clothes were torn. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with relief. "You came," she whispered. "They're here. They're always here." "Who's here?" I asked, my mind reeling. She pointed a trembling finger towards the lake. "They live in the water. They come out at night." I followed her gaze and saw them. Figures, emerging from the fog-shrouded lake. They were tall and gaunt, their skin pale and translucent. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light. They moved with a fluid, almost hypnotic grace, their silent forms cutting through the mist. Fear, primal and overwhelming, gripped me. "We have to get out of here," I said, grabbing the woman's hand. We fled the mill, running as fast as we could. But they were faster. They gained on us with every step, their silent forms closing in. We reached the edge of the woods and stumbled through the undergrowth, the branches tearing at our clothes. I could hear them behind us, their footsteps soft and relentless. Suddenly, the woman tripped and fell, her ankle twisting beneath her. She cried out in pain. "I can't go on," she said, her voice filled with despair. "Leave me. Save yourself." I couldn't leave her, not after coming this far. I helped her to her feet and we continued on, limping through the darkness. We finally reached my car, scrambling inside and locking the doors. I started the engine and sped away, leaving the figures behind us. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw them standing at the edge of the woods, their eyes burning into me. They didn't chase us. They simply watched us go. Back at my apartment, the woman, who introduced herself as Sarah, was pale and shaken. I made her some tea and tried to calm her down. "What were those things?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head. "I don't know. I've been seeing them for weeks. They started appearing after they dredged the lake." "Dredged the lake?" "Yeah," she said. "They were looking for something. An old artifact, they said. Something that was lost in the lake a long time ago." Suddenly it clicked. The accident, the screams, the fog, the mill. It all made sense now. Years ago, a group of us, teenagers bored and looking for trouble, had stumbled upon an old legend about the lake. A legend about a hidden artifact, a relic of immense power, said to be guarded by something. We dismissed it as a silly story, but one night, fueled by alcohol and youthful bravado, we decided to explore the lake. We took a boat out into the fog, searching for the artifact. We found something, all right, something that shouldn't have been disturbed, something that had been sleeping in the depths of the lake for centuries. An accident happened. The boat capsized. 2 of my friends drowned. I barely made it out alive. I had buried the memory deep inside me, trying to forget what I had seen. But now it was all coming back. The dredging of the lake had awakened something ancient and malevolent. And Sarah and I were caught in the middle. "We have to stop them," I said, my voice filled with determination. "We have to put them back where they belong." Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and hope. "How?" she asked. "How can we stop them?" I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing. I couldn't run anymore. I had to face my past. I had to confront the darkness in the lake. The realistic explanation is that the dredging disturbed the ecosystem of the lake, leading to the emergence of unusual algae blooms and changes in the behavior of local wildlife. This, combined with the town's history of tragic accidents and lingering local legends, created a fertile ground for mass hysteria and shared hallucinations. Sarah, likely suffering from some form of trauma related to the lake, became convinced of the presence of these creatures and projected her fears onto the environment. My own repressed guilt and trauma from the accident made me susceptible to her delusions, leading me to perceive the same things she did. The figures we saw were likely distorted interpretations of natural phenomena, fueled by our shared anxieties and the power of suggestion. But even with that rational explanation swirling in the back of my mind, a chilling doubt lingered. What if it wasn't just hysteria? What if the legends were true? What if something truly ancient and malevolent had been unleashed upon the town? The answer, I knew, lay back at the lake, and I had to find it before it was too late.